Welcome one and all, you're listening to another realization. The world is replete with information, so how do you filter it down to the actual truth? I myself do not adhere to any doctrine. I am not concerned with believing as I am with knowing. So let's look at the threefold nature of knowledge, known as the Trivium. The Trivium is part of the classical liberal arts education system, and I am not using the word liberal with a political connotation here. I am talking about liberating knowledge. The liberal arts, the higher arts, which among the Romans only free men were permitted to pursue, were in the Middle Ages these 7 branches of learning: grammar, logic and rhetoric, known as the Trivium, and arithmetic, geometry, music and astronomy, known as the Quadrivium, which we'll discuss another time. In modern times, the liberal arts include the sciences, philosophy and history, etc., which compose the course of academical or collegiate education, hence the degrees in the arts, the Master and Bachelor of Arts. The 7 liberal arts are not taught to the servile, but to the free. That is why they are not taught at any regular public school, because public schools prepare you for servitude. The liberal arts prepare you for mental and physical liberty. The Trivium is the pathway to truth. It is the methodology for knowing how to learn or know anything, how to determine the veracity of information, how to weed through falsehoods and eliminate those falsities and don't take them in as mental food. Based on that accurate information, we can come to understand the meaning of things, and we can answer the question, why? And in answering that question, why, we become empowered to create any positive and lasting change in our lives. This is the way we can improve ourselves, and ultimately it has to do with the improvement of the mind. The Trivium is intricately and inextricably interwoven with the human psyche and our ability to improve our mental, psychological and spiritual well-being. Let's start with some etymology. What is the root meaning of education? It is derived from the Latin word educare, which means to lead out from. What is it leading us out from? Darkness. It is leading us out from the darkness of ignorance, and it is bringing us into the light of knowledge. The Trivium is derived from 2 Latin words, from the Latin tres, tria, meaning 3, and the Latin via, which means path, way, or method. Altogether, it says 3 ways, 3 paths, or 3 methods. The 3 paths that lead us out from the darkness of ignorance and bring us into the light of knowledge. These 3 paths are metaphor for the 3 subjects of the Trivium, which consists of general grammar, formal or Aristotelian logic, and classical rhetoric. General grammar is a systemic method of gathering raw data of a similar nature into a body of knowledge. When that gathering is complete, we call it a subject or a study. You are gathering data from an eclectic variety of sources, meaning a wide variety of sources. You can't just pull from 1 or 2 places, you have to go through several. You have to be open and not judge the information hastily based on likes or preferences, interpretations or opinions. This is taking information in regardless of where it comes from. It has to be done dispassionately. It has to be done in an open-minded way. Because your mind kind of works like a parachute. It doesn't work if it isn't open. Not bringing your feelings into play at this step. Formal logic is the method of bringing full understanding to that body of knowledge by systemically eliminating all stated contradictions within it. At this point, we have a coherent, meaningful set of data due to the application of the rules of grammar, and we have an understanding brought about by making that knowledge consistent, by applying the rules of logic, whereby it now stands in formation. You inform yourself by way of understanding the correlations within yourself and around yourself, which we'll get to. The third step of the trivium is classical rhetoric. In this step, we communicate this comprehensive knowledge and understanding to ourselves and to others. We utilize the insights in the real world in the form of instructions or protocols, so therefore we apply another set of rules, which is rhetoric. This is because you use your mind in a three-step fashion. You decide what you know from making an observation. How thoroughly or to what degree do you understand that piece of knowledge? And how can you explain what you know and understand to yourself and to others? So you can simplify to knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Note that I'm using wisdom and knowledge separately and not interchangeably, because they are not to be used interchangeably. Just having knowledge is separate from actually understanding what you happen to know. And having knowledge without actually applying it to your life is not to be wise. Wisdom is applying what you know and understand in the real world. You act in accordance with what you know and understand. You know high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, yet you still drink products that contain it. That's having knowledge without being wise. And it also constitutes the ability to explain what you know to others. I mean, would I be a wise person if I didn't go on the air and explain this information to others, while others need it to understand the things that are happening around them and within them? The answer is no. I wouldn't be a wise person because I would be holding on to essential knowledge that can help other people, and by not helping to improve other people's lives with it, you are not a wise person, period. There is a difference between knowing the path and actually walking the path. So you consolidate the observations you make with the trivium. I wanted to continue with some basic epistemology. The universe did not create good and evil per se, for those are concepts of man. Rather, the universe created reality and unreality. Reality is everything the universe has created. Unreality is everything man creates in his or her own mind. Let's say I see that something is given to me in a newspaper. I know that it needs to be thought through. I don't take it at face value. However, if I see a sunrise, there is no interpretation needed. That's just a feature of reality. And of course, anyone can say, what is reality? What is objective? And of course, such questions are relevant, but eventually you reach a point whereby it is not a matter of explaining why something is, but that you have to understand that it exists objectively, and that you are bound by it if you choose to live. You see, I question every day why I need to eat and drink. But eventually it becomes irrelevant to question it, because I understand that if I don't eat and drink, I will die. That's reality. That's the truth. And reality is not dependent upon my perception that I don't have to. It doesn't matter if you don't believe that you need to eat or drink. In fact, the reality is that you do need to eat and drink. It doesn't matter if you do or don't believe in gravity. The reality is that I will fall to my death if I choose to jump off a tall enough cliff. So perception and reality are not the same. As a matter of fact, they can be inextricably opposed to each other. When one is acting upon unreality, which is when evil or bad things usually happen. And deep down, everybody knows that perception is not reality. You wouldn't cross a busy street without looking left or right, because in truth you can be run over by a vehicle if you don't. This situation is not dependent on your perception. But by living in harmony with such principles, it will create a drastically different experience. Take thermodynamics, for example. A liquid is cooler than a gas. This is a principle. It is the truth. Because this is the truth, it does not restrict us, but enables us. Using this principle, we can condense and expand a substance between gas and liquid to create refrigeration. With this principle, we have more understanding and more power. Principles are truths that create freedom. I know full well that being the instigator of harm, actually initiating harm onto another living creature, will result in a dire consequence that will bring about the same experience in my own life. Ergo, I will inexorably have harm done unto me by having initiated harm unto another. Now, instead of resenting and going against this principle, I will choose to live in harmony with other sentient beings. I do not initiate harm, but I do defend myself forcefully if harm is done unto me, because that is a right I have when someone else is wrong, which is a topic for another time. But it basically boils down to the underlying truth that is independent from any perception, and that is consequentialism, or as I like to call it, causality. The fact that you're bound by consequences for any action you take. You choose not to eat or drink, you cease to exist in the three-dimensional realm. Or to stay in colloquial terms, you die. You choose to defy gravity and jump off a cliff, you die. If a society cannot discern right behavior from wrong behavior objectively, it will not be a free society, but a controlled society. You add 2 pencils to 2 other pencils and you believe that you will have 5 pencils because you need 5. Guess what? You won't have enough pencils because you will still have 4 pencils. That is the truth. It is not my truth or someone else's. Reality is not perception. Perception has to be aligned with reality. You either choose to live in harmony with the truth or suffer as a result of not doing so. The point is, you are not critical of what the universe creates, of what is, like gravity, temperature, universal laws of behavior, etc. But you do have to be critical. You have to add discernment to anything that comes from man. How do you recognize flaws in things that come from man? Things that have been done by man, which have a reason to them? And how do you know that the reason is valid and true? By spotting logical fallacies and arguments for why something is done by someone, or simply statements that are made or the conclusions that are drawn. In the next few minutes you will have the savvy to be able to spot logical fallacies and inconsistencies in an instant. So let's take a look at a list of some common logical fallacies. Humans are perfectly capable of knowing the truth. However, sometimes people are subject to bias and feelings. So by using intellectual and logical filter methods, you can more easily recognize falsity by understanding logical fallacies. Argumentum ad verecundium, or appeal to authority. This fallacy is committed when a person in position of authority of a particular area makes a claim that is related to that area or any other relevant subject, and that the claim can be accepted as true purely for the reason that an authority figure made the claim. So he or she must be right. It doesn't really make sense to just take something at face value from someone whom is regarded as an authority, because that does not make them all-knowing and all-seeing. They make mistakes and don't often tell the truth. As a matter of fact, they might willfully lie to you and misuse their position of authority to make profits out of you, or to bring forth an agenda. So you have to understand that even though if an authority figure tells you something, it has to be questioned. You cannot just take it at face value from an authority, because they might be wrong. The same way everyone might be wrong. The same way everyone can also be right about a subject, without necessarily having to be an authority figure on the subject. So it is fallacious to assume that the person in question is wrong just because they are not a qualified authority or expert on the subject at hand. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because the fact that an unqualified person makes the claim doesn't provide any legitimate evidence to disprove the claim of the so-called unqualified person. Just because he or she is not on a pedestal of authority doesn't mean they are wrong. A brilliant quote from Gerald Massey really sums up this erroneous way of thinking. They must find it difficult, those who have taken authority as truth, rather than truth as authority. Argumentum ad hominem. Attack the person, not the argument. We've all heard of the good old ad hominem attack. An ad hominem is a general category of fallacies, in which a claim or argument is rejected on the basis of some irrelevant facts about the author of, or the person presenting the claim or argument. Typically, this fallacy involves two steps. First, an attack against the character of the person making the claim, her circumstances or her actions is made. Second, this attack is taken to be evidence against the claim or argument the person in question is making or presenting. There are four types of ad hominem arguments. Abusive ad hominem, where the person is directly attacked. Oh, don't listen to them, they're just a bunch of snake oil salesmen. Oh, well, you're not a doctor, so you can't be right. How can you give advice about marital problems if you haven't been married yourself? Just because an average bloke or an indigent person says it instead of an authority doesn't mean it isn't true. Circumstantial ad hominem. Personal circumstances motivate a person's argument, so it must be false. So you attack a claim by asserting that the person making the claim is making it simply out of self-interest. So when someone says, you should read this book if you want to acquire a lot of knowledge about this subject, and a person rejects that statement by saying, oh, you only say that because you're the one who's selling it. This sort of counter-argument is fallacious because the personal circumstances of the individual don't serve as evidence against the claim being made by that individual. The book could very well contain a lot of useful knowledge, but rejecting it because it is being sold by that individual doesn't mean that it doesn't contain any useful information, i.e. that their claim is therefore untrue. Guilt by association. Due to an association to something negative, an argument is discredited. So when I say going vegan is an essential part of doing less harm in the world, and someone responds to that with, well, the people behind the scenes and their mainstream media are promoting veganism, and they always lie and they aren't good people. So it can't be right to go vegan because they promote it. It is clear that this sort of reasoning is fallacious because merely rejecting a claim simply because it is pointed out that someone whom is disliked accepts the claim doesn't serve as evidence to disprove the claim. For example, the following is obviously a case of poor reasoning. You think that 1 + 1 = 2. But you know who else had that viewpoint? Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin also believed that 1 + 1 = 2. So you shouldn't believe it. So if someone assumes that you shouldn't look into thelema because it was founded by a gentleman called Aleister Crowley, who eventually got involved in nefarious activities in his life, that doesn't serve as evidence to prove that thelema is a negative school of thought. In fact, having studied the thelemic arts, there is a lot of positive erudition that can be acquired from its teachings. If one only seeks to go beyond this fallacious argument that something is bad because it is promoted by someone who has committed bad things. Which brings us to the fourth type of ad hominem argument, which is ad hominem to quoque. Ad hominem to quoque, also known as the inconsistency ad hominem. This fallacy is committed when it is concluded that a person's claim is false because 1. It is inconsistent with something else a person has said, or 2. What a person says is inconsistent with his or her own actions. When someone says A but they do B, therefore A is claimed to be wrong. The fact that one person claims one thing and does another does not disprove their claim, however. So when person A says, you should never smoke because it is very unhealthy and leads to death, so take my advice and never start. But person A is a hefty smoker himself, so person B assumes, well, he smokes himself, so it can't be that bad. Merely because the actions of someone who makes the claim are inconsistent with the claim doesn't disprove the claim. The reason why an ad hominem of any kind is a fallacy is that the character, circumstances or actions of a person do not have a bearing on the truth or reality of the claim being made, or the quality of the argument being made. Argumentum ad baculum, also known as appeal to fear. So we've seen this during the last couple of years. You go into a store and the owner says, you need to put your mask on. And you say, why? Well, because they will fine us if we don't do so. This line of reasoning is fallacious because creating fear in people does not constitute evidence for a claim. Argumentum ad populum, also known as the bandwagon fallacy, or appeal to common belief. This line of reasoning is fallacious because peer pressure and threat of rejection do not constitute evidence for rejecting a claim. This is especially clear in the following example. Joe says, Bill, I know you think 1 + 1 = 2, but we don't accept that sort of thing in our group. Bill replies, I was just joking, of course I don't believe that. It is clear that the pressure from Bill's group has no bearing on the truth of the claim that 1 + 1 = 2. It should be noted that loyalty to a group and the need to belong can give people very strong reasons to conform to the views and positions of those groups. However, this feeling of loyalty or the need to belong simply do not constitute evidence for a claim. Merely because everybody believes something doesn't mean it is true. Argumentum ad nauseam, also known as appeal to repetition, stating that something must be true because it is stated over and over again. Now, it obviously doesn't make sense if I keep saying vaccines are safe and I keep repeating it over and over again, ad nauseam. And most people repeat after me because I am an expert, because that's how fallacious people's way of thinking is. When an authority states something, it must be true. That this somehow validates the claim that vaccines are safe when they are obviously not safe? Frankly, this was something Joseph Goebbels, the chief propagandist for the Nazi Party, was renowned for, when he said, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Adolf Hitler said something that was akin to the statement made by Goebbels. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Mahatma Gandhi said the following pertaining to the repetition fallacy, which I find very apropos. An error does not become truth by reason of multiplied propagation, nor does truth become error because nobody sees it. Argumentum ad antiquitatem, also known as appeal to common practice. The basic idea behind this fallacy is that the fact that most people do X is used as evidence to support the action or practice. So you often hear, oh, it's okay, everybody does it, so it can't really be wrong, right? This is also why they put up those fake polls that say 90% of the entire nation has got their jab. It is to appeal to common practice. So person A says, I don't vote because I am responsible for myself and I represent myself. And someone whom I don't know is not going to forcibly do that for me. And person B replies, why won't you vote? Everybody does it. So when people argue that eating meat is not wrong because many people have done so for thousands of years, even though our ancestors didn't have the luxury of local food stores like we have now, which provides us with innumerable amounts of choice, it is a fallacy, because the mere fact that most people do something or have done something, especially for a long time, does not make it correct, moral, justified or reasonable. The straw man. Now, some people might be familiar with the good old straw man fallacy, because this is very prevalent in people's day-to-day discussions. When a person simply ignores another person's actual position and substitutes a distorted, exaggerated or misrepresented version of that position. So person A says, "I would like to have a dog." And person B replies, "What's wrong with a cat?" Person A answers, "Nothing, I just prefer dogs, I'm more of a dog person, honestly." And person B goes on to state, "Oh, so you hate cats?" Or Mary says to Bill, "I suggest that we start cleaning the house a little more from now on." Bill replies, "Why, we just cleaned the house 2 months ago." Mary answers, "That's too infrequent. We have to take care of the house a bit more often." Then Bill starts telling his friends, "My wife thinks that we should clean the house every single day now. Can you believe that?" When Mary never actually said that. She just meant a bit more often than before, which was obviously valid. Non sequitur. A non sequitur is a conclusion or reply that doesn't follow logically from the previous statement. Most believers in government openly describe that the reason government is needed is because people are malicious, negligent, nasty, and cannot be trusted. And because human beings are so careless, stupid, and malicious that they cannot be trusted to do the right thing on their own, the situation be improved by taking a subset of those very same careless, stupid, untrustworthy and malicious human beings and giving them societal permission to forcibly control all the others and give them the right to do harm unto those who disobey them. Why would anyone think that rearranging and reorganizing a group of dangerous beasts would make the others civilized? It does not follow. Statism never did. Petitio principii, or simply begging the question, assuming an answer in the way a question is phrased, using the question at issue to reach a conclusion at the same issue. When someone asks, "Well, how do I know that this is true?" "Oh, because this expert said so." "Well, how do I know that this expert is right?" "Because he earned his master's in virology and microbiology." Duly noted, but still, how do I know that what he's saying is true? Well, this news article quoted him, and they also vouched for his reliability. The same argument is being repeated over and over again. Or when someone asks, "Why does opium induce sleep?" Well, because it has a soporific quality, which is just another way of saying that they induce sleep in a more classical style, but it does not explain why it causes that effect. And this is something you see in dictionaries a lot. If you go to modern dictionaries, you'll see circular reasoning, begging the question. You'll go to a particular term and you'll have to go to 3 other different concepts before you finally understand what it means. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because simply assuming that the conclusion is true directly or indirectly in the premises does not constitute evidence for that conclusion. Obviously, simply assuming a claim is true does not serve as evidence for that claim. Argumentum ad passiones, also known as appeal to emotion. This fallacy is committed when someone manipulates people's emotions in order to get them to accept a claim as being true. More formally, this sort of reasoning involves the substitution of various means of producing strong emotions in place of evidence for a claim. If the favorable emotions associated with X influence the person to accept X as true because they feel good about X, then he has fallen prey to the fallacy. This sort of reasoning is very common in politics and it serves as the basis for a large portion of modern advertising. Most political speeches are aimed at generating feelings in people so that these feelings will get them to vote or act a certain way. In the case of advertising, the commercials are aimed at evoking emotions that will influence people to buy certain products. In most cases, such speeches and commercials are notoriously free of real evidence. An appeal to emotion would look like something akin to this. The new ultra skinny diet will make you feel great. No longer be troubled by your weight. Enjoy the admiring stares of the opposite sex. Revel in your new freedom from fat. You will know true happiness if you try our diet. It is fallacious because using various tactics to incite emotions in people does not serve as evidence for a claim. This fallacy is actually an extremely effective persuasive device, as many people have argued. People's emotions often carry much more force than their reason. Logical argumentation is often difficult and time-consuming, and it rarely has the power to spur people to action. It is the power of this fallacy that explains its great popularity and wide usage. However, it is still a fallacy. In all fairness, it must be noted that the use of tactics to inspire emotions is an important skill. Without an appeal to people's emotions, it is often difficult to get them to take action or to perform at their best. For example, no good coach presents his or her team with syllogisms before the big game. Instead, he or she inspires them with emotional terms and attempts to fire them up. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. However, it is not any acceptable form of argumentation. As long as one is able to clearly distinguish between what inspires emotions and what justifies a claim, one is unlikely to fall prey to this fallacy. The red herring, also known as the smokescreen or wild goose chase. This is one that politicians use a lot. It is a fallacy in which an irrelevant topic is presented in order to divert attention from the original issue. The basic idea is to win an argument by leading attention away from the argument and to another topic. Is the case on the missing children still ongoing? No, it is not. Because we are currently on the verge of a great crisis that we need to be argus-eyed of. And I have made a solemn vow to the people that I will show sagaciousness against this encroaching inundation that stands before us. Granted, but what does that have to do with my question? Or in a more personal instance, I know you don't want me to borrow your car, but I was going to pick up coffee for you. Don't you love coffee? This sort of reasoning is fallacious because merely changing the topic of discussion hardly counts as an argument against the claim. Argumentum ad ridiculum, also known as appeal to ridicule. This is when humor, usually ridicule or sarcasm, is used to divert attention away from the discussion or to make the other side appear foolish in an attempt to lose the issue in the laugh. Presenting the argument in such a way that makes the argument look ridiculous. Usually by misinterpreting the argument or the use of exaggeration. So when I say vaccines are dangerous because they contain substances like formaldehyde and mercury, which are proven toxins to human beings, and someone responds in the following way, "You think vaccines are dangerous?" Ha ha ha! What? Why aren't you laughing? This also has nothing to do with reasoning. You're just trying to condescend someone. The middle ground. This fallacy is committed when it is assumed that the middle position between two extremes must be correct simply because it is the middle position. This is also very prevalent at the end of a discussion. Well, you see, I know what you're saying, but I don't want to admit to myself that I am wrong. So let's just say that it could be somewhere in the middle and call it a day. This escapist attitude, whereby you don't progress an exchange of information because you want to hold on to your own ego, your paradigm, and your comfort zone, does not constitute a line of reasoning. The relativist fallacy. The relativist fallacy is committed when a person rejects a claim by asserting that the claim might be true for others, but not for him or her. So we hear this when people argue with, "I choose not to see it that way," or "that is your truth, but not mine." This is not reasoning. This is also not a matter of choosing not to see it that way. It implies that you choose not to see it all. It's just denial without any logical reasoning. In other words, ignorance and a cowardliness to face the fact that you might be wrong for a time, which indicates a strong attachment to your own ego. And that's all the your truth, my truth, their truth movement is. It's a stagnation in the growth in knowledge due to an attachment to a comfortable ambience or to enormous amounts of hubris. Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a principle that is applied when one has to choose between two or more explanations that are given for an uncertain situation, and when you choose between the most reasonable and the most logical out of all the explanations. So picture yourself looking at a tree that looks like this. It is missing its entire trunk. So when I and someone else give our take on the situation because all of us were not there when it happened, I would say someone sawed it off with a chainsaw, which explains the smooth, flat cut. And someone else says a comet struck the tree and took half of it with it in its trajectory. Which explanation seems more logical to you? It would be the chainsaw. And that is when you say, I pick Occam's razor, i.e. you pick the most reasonable explanation. So Occam's razor is exercising perspicaciousness. You see, there is a fraction of people that is probably going to derail me for saying something as simple as, when the sun comes up, it is just what is and you don't need to question it. This fraction argues that what we've been told about our world in the universe is a lie, and that we actually live on a flat surface from start to finish, a flat earth. So I seem to be in a bit of an uncertain situation here between two explanations about our world, in the sense that I cannot fly my way out of here and take a picture of the Earth. Albeit an average bloke could send his iPhone up to the stratosphere and record a curvature, but they are probably all insiders. The point is, I do know how to apply Occam's razor. When I'm experiencing nighttime and my friend in the United States is experiencing daytime, that constitutes a difference in location with respect to the Earth's position around the Sun, meaning my location on the planet is directly exposed to the Sun, whereas the location of my friend is not exposed to the Sun. Why is that? Because the Earth rotates as a globe, which is provable by merely throwing a stick in the ground and being able to see how the shadow of the stick diverges from its previous position all the time. Why is that? Because the Earth rotates and the location of the stick moves away from the Sun in terms of that particular location diverging from the Sun and returning to that location a day later, which is the explanation for our day and night cycles, which goes hand in hand with all our 4 seasons and the way we explain time. And if this model was accurate, you could observe an apparent change in size of the Sun throughout the day. The Sun would become larger at noon and smaller at sunset. And by using a simple pair of solar observation glasses and a digital caliper, you can confirm that there is no change in size whatsoever. There is also no explanation given for a lunar eclipse from the flat Earth standpoint. Not a sensible one, at least. You can observe the planets as well, And watching over the course of a few days gives a clear picture that they are spherical rather than flat. The chance that most of the planets are spherical but the Earth is flat seems very, very unlikely. And when simplistic and unscientific arguments are given by believers in the flat Earth paradigm, like, I don't believe what you can see through a telescope, it clearly demonstrates that it is merely a belief system, or as I'd like to call it, a religion. When such simplistic and unscientific explanations are given by the flat Earth community, there is obvious shortcomings. And that is when I pick Occam's razor. Out of 2 or more explanations, I pick the one that makes the most sense and is the most logical and observable. The flat Earth religion is merely a symptom of rigid skepticism, which is the condition of being so adamantly skeptical about literally everything that you're being told and what you see around you. And of course you should be skeptical, but not rigidly, which is once again what happens when one does not possess the discernment and proper filter methods to substantiate their skepticism. Affirmation through negation, also known as apophasis or the apophatic inquiry, removing the negative so that we get to that which remains as the essence of a thing in order to know it. Obtaining knowledge by removing that which something is not, or the identification through the negative, the opposite of what something is, looking at the qualities that something is not in order to understand what it is. So if you're trying to understand the definition of a right behavior, you look at all the things that are not right behaviors, such as stealing, theft, rape, trespass, coercion, assault, and deception. So by way of this understanding, you basically boil it down to initiate no harm to another sentient being. And so you know that every action which does not initiate harm unto another sentient being is a right, and you can do everything you want as long as it doesn't initiate harm unto another sentient being. This way you have defined right behavior by identifying what it is not. This is the apophatic inquiry. What should not be there? What needs to be removed? What is creating the problem or the imbalance? And then work on removing that. Many people from another community, called the New Age community, will insist that you should refrain from engaging the negative. Well, allow me to demonstrate how utterly ridiculous that notion is. In order for you to solve any problems at all, you have to first acknowledge that the problem is there. You have to know what the negative problem is so that you can address it and then work on solving it. The first step of problem solving is to acknowledge that the problem is there. Almost every doctrine that stems from the New Age religion always revolves around passivity, keeping you inactive and firmly ensconced in the right brain hemisphere. And this is its intention, to keep you impotent. And we'll talk more about the New Age religion in the future. So now that the filter methods and logical fallacies have been explained, we can see once again how it is tied in with the dichotomy between reality and unreality. All of the logical fallacies and inconsistencies we've just mentioned are the result of man's attachment to unreality, which basically constitutes anti-rationalism, because people equate their feelings, what makes them feel good about themselves and what they want the world to be, with truth, instead of understanding what is really occurring. And that is the culprit. Because people judge with their feelings as opposed to reason, they remain ignorant of a lot of knowledge, and as a result they do not develop an accurate understanding of the subject at hand, because they have incomplete data, from whence people don't engage in wisdom but instead they engage in folly, and as a result people become largely apathetic. Because once again, the Trivium reflects the threefold way with which we use our mind. Why do people behave in the way that they do? They behave in the way that they do because of what they think they understand, based on the information they have taken in. Similar to a computer system. Data goes in, it gets processed, and then the data is projected. Good data in, good data out. Bad data in, bad data out. The Nash equilibrium. John Nash's equilibrium is perhaps my most favourite, because it reveals the true meaning behind any discussion. A discussion shouldn't be a skirmish between egos, it should be viewed as an opportunity to learn and grow. In a discussion, there are no losers, only winners. One learns and one teaches, and ultimately all grow. If someone is right, and the other person happens to be wrong about a particular subject, they both win something of value, spiritual growth, in the sense that one person has been able to apply their rhetoric and the other person has learned something new, which both resemble immense growth if everybody is honest with themselves. The root of the word conversation is derived from two Latin words, from the Latin prefix con, which means together, and the Latin verb verso versare, which means to change together in a conversation. I thank you all for watching, and I hope that you took note of the things that have been discussed here, and I'll see you soon.